You ever wonder how these huge companies, like Amazon, Microsoft, Booking.com, how they just keep innovating like nonstop? It's not magic. And it's not just about hiring the smartest people on the planet. It's actually all about building a culture of experimentation. So today, we're going to dive into exactly how they pull that off.
Okay, so let's start with a story. Picture this. It's late 2017 at Booking.com. A designer comes up with this wild idea. They say, let's just throw out our homepage. The one they'd spent years optimizing, packed with all this content. And they want to replace it with this super clean, super minimalist version you see on the right. All it has is one simple question. Where are you going? That's it. All those pictures, all that text, all those buttons they'd worked on for ages, poof, gone.
So you can probably guess how this went over. The idea was met with huge skepticism, and I mean right from the very top. The CEO at the time, Jillian Tans, she was pretty much convinced it was going to fail. And get this, the head of experimentation, the guy in charge of this stuff, was so sure it would totally tank the company's most important numbers that he actually bet a bottle of champagne that it would be a disaster.
So the big question is, why on earth did this test even happen? Well, it's because of one simple, but incredibly powerful rule at the company. Anyone can test anything without asking for permission from management. And that's not just a suggestion, it's like a fundamental part of their entire culture. And believe me, this wasn't some one-off thing. This culture, this empowerment, is what lets Booking.com run over 25,000 tests every single year. I mean, at any given moment, they have quadrillions of different versions of their pages live. It's a huge reason they went from this tiny little Dutch startup to the biggest online accommodation platform in the world. And this isn't just something happening in the travel world. Take Microsoft. Their search engine, Bing, uses the exact same relentless approach. All these tiny data-driven improvements, they all add up, and they boost revenue per search by a staggering 10 to 25% every single year. So, all this brings us to a really, really important question. If this whole experimentation thing is so powerful, if it generates such massive results, why isn't every single company on the planet doing it? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple, and it's got nothing to do with not having the right software or the right tech. The single biggest barrier, it's culture. It all comes down to a mindset that cares more about being right than it does about learning. It's a culture that is just terrified of failure. And here's the cold, hard truth about this stuff. Even at a company that has totally mastered this process, a place like Booking.com, about 9 out of every 10 experiments, they fail to show positive results. 9 out of 10. So failure isn't just some rare thing, it's the absolute norm. But, and this is the crucial part, a 90% failure rate is only a problem when you're just running a few tests. But when you run thousands of them, well, that 10% success rate suddenly turns into thousands of wins. The sheer volume of testing just makes the cost of any single failure practically zero. Okay, so how do you actually build this kind of culture? It's not as simple as just buying some new software. It really requires a fundamental shift in how everyone thinks, and it's all built on a few core pillars. All right, pillar number 1, you have to cultivate curiosity. This means you're creating an environment where surprises are actually a good thing and where failures aren't seen as these costly mistakes, but as opportunities to learn something new. And this has to come from everyone, especially the leaders. They have to be totally okay with being proven wrong. And you know who's great at this? Amazon. Let me give you a classic example. So, Amazon launched a new version of their mobile game. It was called Air Patriots. The team was just shocked by the results. The user retention rate just plummeted by an incredible 70%. Revenue dropped by 30%. I mean, it was a total disaster. But here's where that curiosity thing comes in. Instead of just panicking and rolling back the update, they started asking, why? Why is this happening? And after digging around, they found the culprit. A bug had accidentally made the game about 10% harder. And this mistake, this accidental failure, it sparked a whole new hypothesis. They thought, okay, if making the game harder was so bad, what would happen if we purposely made it easier? So they tested it, and guess what? The result was a 20% jump in both revenue and how long people played the game. A complete failure turned directly into a huge win. That's curiosity and action. All right, let's move on to the second pillar, and this one is absolutely critical. Data has to trump opinions.
It doesn't matter who you are, how senior your title is, how smart you think you are, or how much experience you have. If the data from a good experiment says you're wrong, well, you're wrong. The data wins. End of story.
This means you have to actively fight against what's called the HIPPO, which stands for the highest paid person's opinion. In most companies, the HIPPO's opinion can just shut down a new idea before it ever gets a chance. But in a culture of experimentation, that power is taken away from the person and given to the data. And all of this naturally leads to this idea of democratizing experimentation. See, to get to the kind of skill we're talking about, you just can't have some small, specialized team running all the tests. You have to put the power and the tools into everyone's hands. At Booking.com, for example, something like 75% of their tech and product folks are actively using the company's testing platform. And the process is designed to be really simple. You fill out a quick form with your hypothesis, you launch the test, you watch the metrics in real time, and then, and this is key, all the results, the good and the bad, get shared in one central repository so that everyone can learn from them.
Now, of course, all this raises a really important ethical question, right? Is it actually okay to be experimenting on your users a lot of the time without them even knowing about each specific test? This blew up into a huge public debate, you might remember, after that controversial Facebook emotional contagion study way back in 2012.
So companies handle this in different ways. Booking.com, for instance, they try to avoid having a central testing police because they think it would just slow everything down. Instead, they really lean on their culture of open debate and let the community kind of correct itself. LinkedIn, on the other hand, takes a different path. They have very specific internal rules that straight up forbid any tests that are meant to create a negative experience or mess with users' emotions.
So if all your employees are empowered to make these data-driven decisions on their own, what's left for the leaders to do? I mean, what's their job now? Well, their entire role has to change. Completely.
Yeah, the new job for a leader isn't about having all the answers or barking orders. Instead, it's about setting a huge, ambitious challenge for the whole organization, a North Star. It's about making sure everyone has the systems and the resources they need to test their ideas. It's about being a role model, by actually testing your own ideas and being okay if they fail. And maybe the hardest part of all, it's about learning to just let go and trust your people.
And what's amazing is, this way of thinking isn't new at all. We're talking hundreds of years ago. Francis Bacon, the father of the scientific method, he basically summed up this whole philosophy. He said that real certainty doesn't come from assuming you already know the answers. It comes from having the courage to start with doubt and question everything. So ultimately, this is what it all comes down to for any leader, for any company that wants to build this kind of culture. It really just boils down to two very fundamental questions. First, how willing are you to be confronted every single day with just how wrong you might be? And second, how much autonomy, how much control are you really truly willing to give away? The answers to those two questions, well, they'll determine everything.